Peter is a member of the Rotary Club of Capitol Hill and is truly an exemplary member. I certainly get a lot of inspiration out of all that you've done for Rotary, Peter. So it's a delight to have you here with us today. And we're looking forward to your talk, which ties in very much with the theme that I set this year as president of the Rotary Club of Washington, D.C., which is Rotarians engaging youth for peace in the environment. And you're very much involved with the peace part. It will be very helpful to have your perspective on what Rotary's been doing and also hear about plans for the Youth and Peace in Action, which we're going to be a part of. So without further ado, please go ahead and we'll start.
Well, thank you, President Bill. Good afternoon, friends and guests. It's a pleasure for me to be with you today. I was hoping to be there in person, as Bill mentioned, but stuff happens, and I will come back as soon as I can. I've been coming to your club on a fairly irregular basis for the last 10 or 12 years. So I feel as if I know the club fairly well, and I certainly recognize many of the faces and the names on the call. It's a great club. I've enjoyed all my interactions, and a special congratulations to President Bill on assuming the office of club president. And I applaud your initiative, Bill, of starting a peace working group. I'm very much involved in promoting Rotary's peace agenda. So this was great news as far as I was concerned.
Thank you.
I want to talk about Rotary's historical role as a peace-building organization, because I think it says a lot about where we are in the world, how we are regarded, and why we have such an important reputation and such a successful and valuable brand. So let me go straight in, starting from 1905, when we started. Rotary started fairly slowly. By 1910, there were still only 16 Rotary clubs. The focus at that time, of course, was on service, but the main international focus at that time was on the possibility that war might break out very soon in Europe. And a few years later, in 1914, as you know, Germany and England declared war on each other. It was a terrible war, a very brutal war, a lot of destruction, a lot of deaths, terrible time for 4 years. When the war finally terminated in 1918, the focus within the Rotary world became very much what can Rotary and Rotarians do to prevent the recurrence of such a terrible war. Various meetings were held, culminating in 1921 at the Edinburgh Rotary International Convention. And I notice we have some guests from Edinburgh here. At that convention, Rotarians adopted a resolution calling, amongst other things, for Rotarians to promote international understanding, goodwill, and peace. And those words, international understanding, goodwill, and peace, underlie everything that we stand for in Rotary. They are enshrined in the official object of Rotary. They are the basis of the Rotary Foundation. And they really represent, in a very positive way, the start of Rotary as an international peace-building organization. After the war, the 1920s and 30s, Rotary expanded very rapidly. And I'd like to quote some figures. In 1914, there were 100 clubs within the Rotary family. In 1918, we'd grown to 400. 3 years later, we chartered club number 1,000, the Rotary Club of York in the United Kingdom. 4 years later, we doubled again to 2,000 clubs. Club number 2,000 is Ketchikan in Alaska. In the late 20s, early 30s, there was a bit of a slow decrease in growth because of the Depression. But in 1936, We doubled to 4,000. The Rotary Club of Hanover, Pennsylvania is club number 4,000. And 3 years later, in 1939, we got to 5,000 clubs. Rockmart, Georgia is club number 5,000. So in 1939, with 5,000 clubs and approximately 150,000 Rotarians around the world, Rotary was an enormous organization and very influential. In those days, the classification system was applied rather more stringently than is currently the case. In order to be a member of a Rotary Club, apart from having to be a male, you had to be someone respected in your vocation or your profession, a manager or a partner or a school superintendent or the principal or a sheriff, a civic leader. And when Rotary clubs met for their district conference, it was truly a meeting of movers and shakers. This was the leaders of the community. And when Rotarians met at an international convention, it was a significant event on the international calendar. Just to give you an example, in 1940, the Rotary International Convention was held in Havana, Cuba. Just as a side comment, at that time, there were 58 Rotary clubs in Cuba. Currently, there are none, although we do hope that that will change before too long. At that 1940 convention, Rotarians adopted a resolution calling, again, amongst other things, for respect for human rights. That was the first time those words, respect for human rights, had entered into the international vocabulary. And they became the basis for the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, signed in 1948, arguably one of the most significant documents signed in the last century. In 1942, a number of senior Rotarians met in London. They were concerned about the impact of the war, Second World War, on education and on scientific research and cultural traditions and monuments. They adopted a resolution which led a few years later to the formation of UNESCO, United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. 2 years later, in 1944, when President Truman and Prime Minister Churchill had decided that the time had come to establish an organization that would forever outlaw war, Rotary was one of a very small number of organizations invited to send lawyers and other experts to work alongside officials from China, the former Soviet Union, the United States, and the United Kingdom to begin the process of drafting what would become the United Nations Charter. And when the charter was signed in San Francisco in June of 1945, 49 out of the 800 delegates were Rotarians. Just another side comment. Prior to the Second World War, there were no officially recognized non-governmental organizations, NGOs. Now we have thousands of NGOs. That concept was not well known before the war. Rotary, in effect, was one of the very first NGOs. And although I'm not sure of this, I do know that Rotarians were involved in the drafting of the chapter of the UN Charter, which deals with consultative organizations. And in that chapter is a very first reference in a legal document to the concept of a non-governmental organization. So I would like to claim, I can't prove this, but I'd like to claim that Rotarians invented the name, and Rotary was one of the very first organizations to achieve non-governmental organization status. And Rotary and the Red Cross were the first two organizations to be given consultative status with the UN Economic and Social Council. So our roots with the United Nations go way back and are very strong. In the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, during the time of the Cold War, Rotary's relationship with the UN really went into abeyance. But in the 1980s, we reconnected in a very powerful way when Rotary decided to partner with the World Health Organization with UNICEF, with the Center for Diseases Control, to establish the Global Polio Eradication Initiative. And subsequently, the Gates Foundation joined in, Gavi, the Global Alliance for Vaccines, and other international partners. And since then, we've had a very close relationship with UNICEF in particular. All the money that is raised by Rotarians around the world is channeled through Rotary to UNICEF, and they're the ones who are responsible for administering, overseeing the vaccination, the drops in the two countries that are still outstanding, Pakistan and Afghanistan. Again, just another side comment. This year, there have only been 2 cases of the wild polio virus. We're all on tenterhooks. We all believe that the last case, which was in Afghanistan in February, may well be the last case of polio. 2 cases this year. We are so close to the finish line. So we're, as I say, we are hopeful that we'll get there perhaps this year or next year. In the late 1980s, Rotarians increasingly were reaching out to organs of the United Nations, UNESCO, UNICEF, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, United Nations Environment Program. So in 1990, Rotary established the Rotary Representative Network, which most of you have probably never ever heard of. I had the good fortune to be appointed as the Dean of this network several years ago. It's the committee that oversees Rotary's relationships with the United Nations and other international organizations. Currently, there are 16 entities in the network, including the ones I just mentioned, UNICEF, UNESCO, UN Commission on Women, FAO, WHO, UN Environment, plus a number of other international organizations, such as the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the African Development Bank, the Organization for American States, the African League, European Union, the Commonwealth of Nations. And Rotary has appointed Rotarian representatives, ambassadors with a small a, to be our liaison in the cities where those entities are based. So we have 2 Rotary representatives in Rome, 2 in Paris at UNESCO, 2 in Geneva, 2 in Brussels, 2 in London. We have 6 in New York at the General Assembly, 4 in Washington, DC, and others spread around the world, in Manila, in Abidjan, in Cairo, in Addis Ababa. And they are responsible for promoting Rotary's profile in the international community. 3 years ago, let me just back up. The main activity of the Rotary Representative Network for the last 20 years has been to host the annual Rotary Day at the United Nations. This was held in early November. There was a time when this event was the 3rd most significant event on the Rotary International calendar, after the International Convention and the International Assembly. And typically the board would meet in New York either just before or just after the Rotary Day. It was open to Rotarians and Rotaractors. Frequently, the Secretary General of the United Nations would address this gathering, or other senior officials. It was a very significant event. 3 years ago, for the first time, we met in Geneva at the European headquarters of the United Nations. 2 years ago, for the first time, we met in Nairobi at the African headquarters of the United Nations. I had the good fortune to be part of the planning team for that event. And on the first occasion that I went down to Nairobi, I discovered that the UN Environment Program is actually headquartered in Nairobi. So I asked to meet with representatives of UNEP. 5 young people came into the room, all environmental activist-looking people. Unbeknown to us, the team leader was a Rotary Peace Fellow from New Zealand. Much better than that.
Small world.
The second person was a former Rotary ambassadorial scholar. The third person was the president of one of the local clubs, and they came with a list of 25 environmental projects which they thought might be of interest to clubs and districts around the Rotary world. That led to a meeting between then President Barry Rassin and the Chief Executive of UN Environment, which led to a meeting between John Hugo, the Chief Executive of Rotary, and senior officials of UN Environment. And that in turn led to a decision to establish a task force to create an environmental toolkit. This was a partnership between the staff in Evanston, the staff of UNEP in Nairobi, and Rotary's Environmental Sustainable Rotary Action Group. The publication was issued in Hamburg 2 years ago at the International Convention. It's a very professional publication, a great toolkit for those who want to get involved in environmental projects. It helps to identify projects, how you go about implementing environmental projects, how to evaluate, how to monitor. It's available on the Rotary website. I encourage you to download it. It's full of good information. And I hope that this will be a role model. My apologies, that was the phone. I'm happy to pay a fine for that intervention. I hope that the toolkit, the environmental toolkit, which of course is very relevant now that environment is one of our areas of focus, I hope that that will become a role model for other areas of focus over the next year or two. So we've continued to have Rotary Days, and we've expanded that concept to other organizations. We've had Rotary Days, as you well know, at the White House, at the World Bank, at the Organization for American States, at the Commonwealth of Nations. Last November, we had an event in Brussels to celebrate World Polio Day and to thank the member states of the European Union for their contributions to the polio initiative. We had an event last April in Geneva, primarily focused on maternal and child health care, but with some reference obviously to COVID-19 and to polio. And these Rotary Days will continue. They have become an important part of enhancing Rotary's global stature. So the peace agenda continued in the late 1990s to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the passing of Paul Harris, our founder. We decided to introduce the Rotary Peace Fellowship Program. The first cohort went in 2002. We partnered with what is now 7 universities around the world, each of which is renowned for their peace curriculum and their stature as peace universities. We now have over 1,500 Rotary Peace Fellows that have graduated from the program, and the Rotary Club of Washington, D.C. has sponsored, I think at least 3 or 4 Peace Fellows. So you're very familiar with the program, and I thank you for your support. Long after polio has been eradicated, and we absolutely will eradicate polio, I actually think that the Rotary Peace Fellowship Program may well prove to be Rotary's most enduring legacy. These Peace Fellows are amazing. They are the creme de la creme. They are all over the world doing amazing things. Some cases in conflict jurisdictions, in other cases working with governments, with UN bodies. There are 9 Peace Fellows in the World Bank. There are 16 in New York, and several of our clubs in Washington, D.C. Have a number of Rotary Peace Fellow members. So the Peace Fellowship Program is going great guns. Earlier this year, we opened up a new Peace Center in Kampala, Uganda, Makerere University. We're very proud of this university. The Africans are incredibly proud, and they have raised enough money to fund the center for the first 2 years. And I've no doubt that that funding will continue, and the Rotary Peace Center in Uganda will probably become the first peace center to be fully self-funded. So exciting things for the Rotary Peace Fellowship Program. We established the Rotary Action Group for Peace, which has become the main vehicle by which Rotarians who are particularly interested in promoting peace can participate. And that has become very active, not just in the US, but in parts of Europe as well. There are various national chapters. And of course, when Future Vision was introduced in 2010, peace was one of the 6 areas, now 7 areas of focus. We have partnered with a number of peace organizations. We partnered with the Institute for Economics and Peace, which is the organization that established the World Peace Index. It's run by Steve Killalea, who's often described as the Australian equivalent of Bill Gates, a very wealthy man who has decided to use his considerable resources to promote the economic implications of peace. And that has become a very significant part of Rotary's peace building agenda as well. We partnered with the IEP to establish a peace academy. Many of our Rotary Peace Fellows have become IEP ambassadors. We've also partnered with Mediators Beyond Borders, and I noticed that your speaker at your next meeting is Prabha Sankaranayan, who is the Chief Executive of Mediators Beyond Borders. Tremendous organization. And I would be most remiss if I didn't refer to the partnership with Peace Corps. We have a president who's very active as a Peace Corps volunteer. I noticed that Dick Pyle was also on the call. Dick has also had a long and rich history of contributing to the activities of the Peace Corps. And we are exploring ways in which Rotarians can engage with returned Peace Corps volunteers through an organization called Partnering for Peace. Many Rotarians want to remain active after they retire, and this is a good opportunity and a great organization to get involved with and work alongside. So there are many aspects of Rotary's peace building agenda. Every 3 years we have a peace symposium when we bring Rotary Peace Fellows together at an international convention. There are many peace conferences around the world. I think there have been 4 or 5 in this Rotary year alone. We have a peace academy. Many Rotarians ask, what can I do as an individual Rotarian to make a difference in peace? Well, you can go online to the Peace Academy and do a 3-hour course. You'll become a certified Rotary peace builder. And there are all sorts of practical suggestions on things that you and your club can do to promote more peace and unity. We have peace builder clubs and peace builder districts. And I'm delighted to see past District Governor Mike Caruso on the call from Portland, Oregon. Mike is the father of the Peace Builder District Initiative and Peace Builder Clubs. Thank you, Mike, for what you're doing. You're making a great contribution. So there are many aspects of peace. I'm often asked, what will Rotary be involved with after polio? What's the next corporate project? Well, of course, the official mantra is not to talk about life after polio, keep the focus on polio. We need to eradicate polio. But of course, we need to be prepared for the day when that happens. And so obviously some thought has been given to possible programs or initiatives that would succeed polio. My own personal view, and this is, I emphasize, this is a personal view, I don't see Rotary becoming a maternal and child health care organization. The World Health Organization has got that area of focus well and truly covered. I don't see Rotary becoming a disease prevention or health organization, or really a literacy, or a water and sanitation organization. These are very important parts of what we do, the important areas of focus, but there are many organizations in the world that are focused exclusively on water and have more resources than Rotary has, or literacy. But in the area of peace, and peace and education in particular, I really do think Rotary has the ability to carve out a niche for ourselves and to add value. And there are many peace education initiatives around the world. And I'd like now to tell you about one close to home. As Bill mentioned, or as my bio mentions, I've been heavily involved in alumni and Peace Fellow activities. I chaired the Rotary Peace Centre program for 3 years, which is the committee that selects the Peace Fellows. And I've often wanted to come up with a way in which I could introduce a peace initiative into the Rotary world. And now that I'm an RI director, that gives me a platform, which I have grabbed with open arms. About 15 months ago, I had a series of meetings with two outstanding Rotary Peace Fellows. Patricia Schaefer, who's the Chief Executive of New Gen Peace Builders, an NGO focusing on peace and education for young people based in Charlotte, North Carolina, and Anna Patel, who was at that time the Chief Executive of Outward Bound Peace Building based in New York. And as a result of those discussions, we developed the idea of establishing a zone-wide initiative called Youth and Peace in Action, engaging young community peace builders. And over the last 15 months, we've rolled this program out to the 31 districts in our zones 33 and 34. About half the districts, just a little over half, have fully signed on. This is a massive project. Rotary describes this initiative as the single largest community-based peace building project in Rotary's history. Let me repeat that. This is the single largest community-based peace building initiative in Rotary's history. I've long believed that Rotarians have not only the ability, but a responsibility to engage in ways to overcome the partisan divide that we see, not just in our country, but all over the world. As we all know, conflict starts locally. So solutions to conflict need to be developed locally. What better organization to come up with solutions than the world's largest community-based peace-building organization, Rotary International. So this is very exciting. We're reaching out to clubs all across the two zones, particularly clubs that are sponsoring Interact clubs. The focus is on high school students. We have an elaborate curriculum. If you go online to youthpeaceaction.org, you'll get all the information you need. District 7620 is actively involved. We're one of the champion districts. And I know that Bill and your club is supporting this through your association with your Interact clubs. I'm very excited about this. The formal launch will be on World Peace Day on September the 21st. It's going to be a very exciting event. All over North America, we're getting requests. Can we join in? Can we learn more about it? There are various levels of engagement, $15,000 level, $30,000 level, $50,000 level. It involves training of teachers, training of students. I won't get into too much detail here. I'm happy to follow up afterwards if there are any questions. I encourage you to go to the website. We have a phenomenal website, a great team with Patricia and Anna and others. This, I think, is going to be a significant initiative.
That's 2 fines for you.
Sorry,
we are keeping tabs of the fines that you are accruing.
Yes, that I can't.
I forgive them.
That's the president of Rotary International. So
yeah, that's hard to say no. Yes, please.
So perhaps I've said enough. I don't know how much time I have, Bill. I'm excited about Rotary's peace building agenda. I'm delighted to learn about the Osgood students. And there are others on the call today with whom we'll be meeting very shortly, courtesy of Maria Nelly Pavlicic. There are so many peace-related initiatives. Peace is in our DNA. We are primarily a peace-building organization, and I'm hopeful that that will continue. We need a lot of peace and unity in our own communities, in our own country, around the world. And as I said before, I really believe that Rotarians have the ability, have the passion, have the energy, have the contacts. Our brand is well known, well respected. We have the financial resources. We can make a difference in all sorts of ways at community levels around the world. So with that, Bill, I'll stop. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm a past district governor, so I could go for hours, but I run out of time. Let me stop. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to respond. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. We have already received a number of comments in the chat, thanking you for the excellent history of Rotary. And we have a number of questions. So I will call on you. And if you could please keep the questions succinct and the answers also, because we have a number of them. I'll start with the first one here. I wanted to ask you about Rotary's response to the aftermath of the George Floyd unrest and how Rotary has reacted.
Well, even before that tragic incident, Rotary had issued a diversity, equity, and inclusion statement, a very compelling statement. Early last year, about the time of the George Floyd tragedy, Rotary established a DEI task force. It has been very active. It has come up with a more sophisticated statement, which is on the website. It has encouraged zones and districts all around the world to establish a district DEI committee. We have one in this district, 7620. There are many throughout two zones. In the US in particular, the focus on DEI has taken off. People are very anxious to contribute. There are parts of the country where this is difficult, and there's been some backlash. These discussions are hard. The issues are difficult, but I think Rotary has been proactive, particularly in the US, where these issues are perhaps more pronounced. And I think we will continue to be seen to be taking a proactive stand.
Great, thank you. Dr. Sam had the first question, so we'll let Dr. Sam answer ask the question.
Hey, Peter, glad to have you with us, and thank you for being here. Looking at the numerous things you talked about, the work through the history of Rotary and peace, what would be the three chief things you think we can do that combines peace building and the environment together that makes sense to the general publics across all 214 countries and territories?
Well, just off the top of my head, I wish I'd had this question beforehand. I could have delivered a more sophisticated response. I think the first thing I would suggest is that we need to reach out more intentionally to the communities in which we are based. We have a lot to contribute, a lot of resources. We have a lot of technical ability. We have people who want to get involved in projects. So I think reaching out to local communities, engaging with law enforcement, engaging with the school community, engaging with the faith community, engaging with civic leaders, getting involved in providing information, seminars. We're getting involved. We just signed an agreement last week with Gavi, which is the Global Alliance for Vaccines, to engage with COVAX, the distribution for vaccines all around the world. We need to up our game. We need to be, we have the resources, we can have a much greater impact. President Shaker went online recently and he was alarmed to find that when he tried to Google the 20 most significant NGOs in the world, Rotary's name did not come up. So within minutes, I get a call saying, you are the convener of a committee to enhance Rotary's global stature. So we'll be seeing a lot more activity, getting the word out to the non-Rotary community, what Rotary can contribute. I think in the environment, 2 years ago, we sent a Rotarian to represent Rotary at the COP24 in Katowice, the big environmental conference. I forget where the next conference is. It may be in Glasgow. And we are sending a Rotarian representative, and I think we'll be sending more than one. We are going to try and increase our presence at the key international organizations around the world. So an environment, when we do our surveys of young people, the two issues that young people most want to be involved with are environment and human rights. We've now got environment as an area of focus. Human rights is a little more amorphous. That includes trafficking, bullying, harassment, those issues, and coupled with DEI. So we're moving ahead quite rapidly. The DEI agenda has really become a significant focus of Rotary. It's a significant focus of President Baker, and it will be under President-elect Jennifer Jones next year as well.
Thank you, Peter. And I'll be attending Glasgow myself as media, so I'm already signed up.
All of this is so apropos, and we're looking forward to working with you on the YPA, as I call for short, Youth in Peace in Action. It's going to be really interesting, involving our interactors. And I hope through our peace working group that involves Dr. Sam and May O'Brien and many others in our club, that we as a club will be doing a lot more in the peace arena, along with the environmental arena. And I see a juncture of the two. Obviously, I think those topics are of great interest to youth, and that's why I speak of Rotarians engaging youth, because they're the future. And if we have a world in chaos and climate change, what kind of world are we leaving? So we look forward to the new YPA. Maybe you could just say a few words about the initial rollout of that and how that's going to go. Peter.
Well, the rollout is well underway. Every week, we are now meeting with district committees to provide materials that they need to get schools involved. With high schools coming back very soon, we want to hit the ground running. We have, I think, 150 schools have partnered in the program. We're hoping to get to 300 over the next 2 or 3 weeks. We are very excited about this initiative, and I'm getting so many comments from other parts of North America. High schools want to do it. The students seem very active. And I think it's important we reach out to youth. We need to get our youth to have a better understanding of what peace means and how they can contribute. And I think this program is a small but important step in that process. So I'm excited about what is going to happen. And I'm delighted, Bill, that your club has been so supportive. So thank you for that.
Okay. Well, Peter, thank you for the initiative. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And we look forward to working with you through our 2 Interact clubs and doing more in the future. And thank you very much for being our speaker today. And you're part of our club family, so you're always welcome back. And hopefully we'll be meeting in person again in the near future, and you can come and join us. So I just want to close by saying, we have the tradition of planting a tree in the honor of each of our speakers. It's part of our Trees to the Capital program, which I used to chair, and working along with Dr. Sam. It's now under the chairmanship of Brian Ingram. But normally I would be handing you in person a certificate about, that we will plant that tree. We certainly will, and you will be invited to our next tree planting ceremony, which will probably be in early November. And you will actually be given coordinates of the tree that we planted in your honor.
Great. Thank you very much. I'd be delighted.